Okay. Oh, goodness. Don't tell me I broke TechSmart. Okay, now we're back. All right, one more time. You are doing the daily affirmation warm-up. So if that's not the one that's on, go ahead and go back to your main page so that you can get to the right one, because I did move it. Okay, so I'll give you guys a couple of minutes to do that, the daily affirmation. What you are doing is restructuring the code file by using a while loop to avoid having the same code over and over. Okay, and it should only take you a few minutes to do it. And I will do the attendance. Okay, no Leonel. And no Logan. All right. Raise your hand if you need more time. And it's okay if you do. I just want to check. Okay. So we're going to look at the solution. So before we had 7 print statements with the affirmation in it. So what we want to do is we want to assign a variable, day equals 1, and then while the day is less than or equal to 7, it'll print the affirmation. And then every time it prints in the while loop, it's also adding 1 to the variable day. So it starts as 1. After it runs through the loop once, it turns to 2. And so as long as it is 7 or below, it's going to print that. And when it reaches day 7, which is at the end of a week, then it's going to stop running that while loop. Okay? Does anybody have any questions about that one? Okay, so it's day equals 1. Then while day is less than or equal to 7, you will print the affirmation and then add 1 to your variable day. Okay, so I'll leave that up for a minute so that you guys can correct yours. And I'm going to work slow today because we started the while loops before Christmas break. And I know that y'all haven't been working on them for a couple of weeks now, so we'll ease our way back into it. Do make sure that even if you think you're copying the code that I have, make sure that you are checking it for errors. Don't just assume that it works. Okay, so you should have day equals 1. Then on the next line, while day is less than or equal to 7, colon. Then on the next line, it should indent with your print statement. And then in there, day in print, quotes, plus string day. So it tells you what day it is. Then it has your affirmation. And then on the next line, also indented, day plus equals 1. Okay? And if you did not finish, I'm going to move on, but if you did not finish, let me know and I will come around and help you as we get started. We're going to go ahead and look at the next one. We've got 2 demos, player turns, and then true until false. So we will start with the player turns. So in this one, we're going to learn how to create multiplayer games where players can take turns playing at the same computer. So you may want to add this to your vocab. Player turns, repeatedly take turns based on the number of players. So we'll use this technique whenever we want to tell our players whose turn it is inside of a loop. For example, on the first iteration of a loop with 2 players, we can say, your turn, player 1, and then on the second iteration, we can say, your turn, player 2, and then on the third, it goes back to 1, and so on and so on. Okay? So, how can we extend our syntax for while loops to allow players to take turns? Okay, so remember that with a while loop, we have a while and then some sort of condition it meets and then it does things. So how can we extend our syntax for that? So before we answer that, I want you to remember the modulo. Who can remember what the modulo operator does? Yes, it returns the remainder. Okay, so remember that part. So how can we use that modulo operator then to keep track of whose turn it is in each iteration? Okay, so think about this. We can ask how many people are playing before the loop and create a variable tracking whose turn it is also before the loop. Then inside the loop, we can increment the player variable at the end of a turn using the modulo to loop back to 1 when the number is larger than the number of players. Okay? So remember that when the number is larger than the number of players. So for example, if we have 4 players, we'll increment the player variable by 1 each turn. When player is equal to 4 and we are about to increment again to 5, we'll calculate 5 modulo 4 to instead get back to player 1 rather than the non-existent player 5. So let's go ahead. We're going to look at the code now for this. Our goal with this program is to allow multiple players to play the game Don't Break 20. In this game, players take turns deciding what the next number should be. Players can increment the current number by 1, 2, or 3. Once a player enters a number larger than 20, they lose. Okay? So, if we go play it now, and it says what this is, the number is currently 0, player 1, enter a number. So if I enter a number, it said 1, 2, or 3, so I'm going to enter 3, and it says the number is currently 3, but then it tells player 1 to do it again. So it's not doing anything for multiple players. Okay? So we're going to add some functionality to this game using the power turns technique. First, we need to ask how many players there are. So if you look down here on line 12, there's a comment for ask how many players there are. So on line 13, that's what we're going to do. We're going to add some code to do that. So we're going to make a variable called num_players. And it's going to equal, it's going to be an integer, but it requires input from the player how many people are playing. Okay? So num_players equals int, parentheses, input, parentheses, how many people are playing, and then close the parentheses twice. And I'm going to zoom that in a little bit. That's on line 13. Num_players equals int, parentheses, input, parentheses, how many people are playing, close parentheses twice. Okay, so we're going to use this new variable to figure out when the last player has taken their turn and when we need to go back to player 1. So let's look directly under the move to the next player's turn comment. Move to the next player's turn comment. That is down at the bottom, so we're looking at line 43 now. Okay? So what we need to do is we need to add, and let me add some blank lines so it moves up a bit. We're going to add current player, but that needs to be indented because notice that the comment is current player equals current player modulo num players plus 1. Okay. All right, so this expression is the key to the technique. If we have 4 players and it's player 4's turn, this code will evaluate as 4 modulo 4 plus 1, which simplifies to 0 plus 1 or just 1. So let's go ahead and run this program. We can put in, let's start with 2 people playing. And the number is currently 0, so at player number 1, I can enter a number. Then it goes to player 2. It tells me what the current number is. Oops, 6. And then it corrects me if I put in the wrong number. Okay, and then whoever types in the number that goes over 20, that person is the loser. Okay? And then go ahead and try it one more time. This time, do it with 4 players to check it and make sure that it works. And remember, you can increment by 1, 2, or 3 as you play the game. Okay? Now, I'm going to put line 13 up there again because I know I want to make sure everybody got that piece of code on line 13. Num players equals int input, how many people are playing. It's line 13. And then the last line, 32, current player equals current player modulo num player, so those are 2 variables that we've created, plus 1. Okay, and by getting the modulo, that's how we know to return to 1. Okay? Once you're done, go ahead and you're going to go to the next demo, which is true until false. Okay, so in true until false, we're going to learn a technique called true until false, which is useful when you want to know if something specific happens inside one of your loops. Okay, so true until false, it's a Boolean initialized before a loop that may or may not be changed. We'll use this technique whenever we have some important piece of information we want to know after our loop finishes. For example, if we're looping through students in the class, maybe we want to know if no one has blue eyes once we have looped through each student. So I want you to note that the Boolean variable we use in this technique is not the variable that's controlling our loop. We don't want to end the loop when this variable changes. We just want to check it after the loop finishes. So let's go ahead and move to that little project. Backwards alphabet. And let me minimize that part to make it easier for you to see. All right, so Our goal with this program is to prompt the user to enter some or all of the alphabet backwards, one letter at a time. Right now, the program immediately tells the user when they make a mistake, but we want to build suspense and let them know only at the end of the program. So notice that it is importing a library, okay? This program uses that library to convert strings to numbers and numbers to strings based on the order of letters in the alphabet. As you can see from the documentation that A equals B, or 1, B equals 2, and so on. So, on line 9, we have a comment to initialize a Boolean variable. So we are going to do that by creating a variable called allCorrect, and we're going to make it true. Okay? And we'll use this variable to determine if the user made any mistakes at the end of our program. As such, we need to change it to false if the user does make a mistake. So we're going to find the line that says print, that's not correct, and that is on line 25. And we are going to change that to, instead of that print statement, we're going to change it to all correct equals false. Now, once again, this all correct variable is not used to control the loop. Okay? So it's not going to stop as the user makes a mistake. Then, after the final comment on line 30, we're going to add an if statement. And I will add some extra space to bring that up. So the if statement is going to be if all correct, and remember with Booleans in, whenever you don't give a equals true or equals false to your variable, it's assuming that it's true. So if all correct, you're going to print you got them all right, else print you made a mistake. And then once you're done, go ahead and test it to see that it works. And then test it. And you probably want to test it with it being correct, as well as incorrect. Okay? And then it lets you know that you made a mistake if you did, or it should. Okay? So, to recap, we start by creating a Boolean variable before our loop starts. So that was the all correct. Here, and I'll put this back up so people can see it. Inside our loop, that variable may or may not be changed depending on one or more conditions. After the loop, though, we can do something if the variable is still true, or do something else if the variable was changed to false. That's why we have the if statement at the end. So this technique is called true until false. But how could we reverse it and make it false until true? Any ideas? Could we just adjust the value assigned to it? Okay, so we would start off making it false, and then on line 25, we would change that to true. Okay, so that would set it to true if a condition is met. Okay, let's go back to the lesson. All right, so I am opening up player turns 1, true, false 1, player turns 2, true, false 2, and I am going to look at player turns with you real quick. All right, so remember that repeatedly takes turns based on the number of players. That's the player turns. Here you have your num players equals int input, current player equals 1, while loop. So while playing, it does some things. The current player equals current player modulo, and then num players plus 1. Okay. All right, so you're going to look at your solution, and right now it says, welcome to the animal chain game. To keep the game going, you have to come up with an animal name that starts with the last letter of the previous animal. You can't name an animal that's already been used, how many you're playing. So if I said 2, it says, great, I'll start off with my animal is hummingbird. Now, player 1, it's your turn. Enter an animal that starts with D. So I'll say dingo. So then player 2 has to go O, and I've already I don't remember how to spell orangutan. Can it correct me? Orangutan. Oh, I put those last two there. All right, so it's going back and forth there. Okay, so that's what we're wanting it to do here. How are you going to get that to work? Okay, so your requirements: use a variable to track and display which player's turn it is. Use the modulo operator to advance to the next player. Here are your functions that are in the library that is already imported. So you'll want to use those options there in order to make it work. Okay, go ahead and get started, and I will help you as you need it. And as you finish it, go ahead and move on to the next step. finish one, make sure you're going to the other ones. I will put all of them up for you. Yeah.
I finished, so I grabbed my phone.
Okay, thank you.